Yo, yo, yo. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you slept at least like for more than 4 or 5 hours. I don't know, like yesterday's party was a little bit crazier than we anticipated, but we were able to get here. And yeah, game day is the third day is starting, and we have amazing guest, Kevin Goeke. Big applause for him. And now is his time to shine.
Nice. Can you hear me, guys? Yeah, all right. So I'll be doing a talk about principles for art and design today. And I hope I can give you some tools that you can use for your own art. And the whole structure of this talk will be about a quick introduction of me and my art. And then I'll be talking about principles. And after that, I'll be showing you a process of a painting. So I'm a German concept artist and designer. I work, currently I'm at Enva as a lead artist. And I also have a company with friends in Berlin. It's called Drink and Draw Berlin. We do live events, live drawing, art events, art exhibitions, and workshops. And this is also where I started teaching. And I do some mentoring and occasionally some workshops. So here's some work I did over the past few years. And on the left side, we can see it's something more concept artsy, and on the right, it's more of the work I do for my personal stuff, and for the posters we do for Drink and Draw. So the style on the left will be a bit more the style that will show you the painting of in the end. So I think it's more fitting because it looks more like concept art and less like the illustrative style. So I also had the pleasure to work a few years on Horizon Forbidden West at Character Design Studio. It was a great time. I learned a lot there. Definitely a humbling place to be. And some more classical illustration work for fantasy IPs. In this case, it's Gwent. Yeah. So the goal of this talk is to give you some tools that you can use for your own art and design. And I know a lot of you are already pros, and I'm pretty sure the concepts that I'm talking about is something that you already know. But one of the most important realizations I had with these things is, like, it's always fundamentals. Like, if we can push for good fundamentals, then we're in a very good spot. So what are principles? Principles are rules and guidelines. They're formulas that help us achieve a certain goal. So let's say we want to create a good proportion, then something like golden ratio could be the principle to go. Or if we want to create an illusion of depth in an artwork, then maybe we go for atmospheric perspective. And there are assumptions to improve art and design. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have to bend or break the rules to achieve a certain goal. Story is what gives us the guide for this. So sometimes we have to break the rules to achieve a certain feeling. So stories are our guide here. And what kind of principles am I talking about? I talk about things like echoing, repetition, juxtaposition, contrast, shapes, silhouettes, hierarchy, big, medium, small, golden ratio, and atmospheric perspective. And they're all formulas that can help us achieve certain goals. And I considered talking about all 12 of them today, but I guess it will be way too much. So I focused on 3. And these will be gesture, structure, anatomy, hierarchy, and shapes and silhouettes. All right, 1 second. So gesture, structure, anatomy is something that I picked up from Steve Houston. It's something that you usually do with live drawing. And the basic idea is to break your process down into smaller steps. And in those steps, you focus on very specific parts of your drawing. So for example, with gesture, we try to capture the story or pose in a few simple lines. And after that, we go for structure. We want to create the illusion of something three-dimensional, and we build this up with basic forms like cubes, tubes, and spheres. And then we apply anatomy to that. And anatomy is something that I will use a bit more loosely today, because anatomy for me basically is a deeper understanding of the subject we're painting. So in this case, it's human anatomy, and we're introducing some more intricate overlaps, transitions, and forms. And if that is right, we can go on to rendering, right? And with live drawing, usually you would set up your whole drawing first, and then you outline the shadows, you fill that in, and that gives you the basic structure of your painting, right? You have two values to work with. And this is like the process I apply to anything. So it can be figure drawing, but it can also be something else, like trees or a whole environment. I just wanted to show you an example of how I would put that into a work with trees or with anything else than figure drawing. And here I try to capture the flow and the rhythm of this tree. It tells me a story of a windswept environment, for example. It gives me some information about the environment itself as well. So this can be on a mountain, it can be on a coastline. And if that is something that I like, I go further into structure. And this is, again, I'm building this up with cubes and tubes, just to get a feeling of how this behaves in the space and how it recedes in space. And what I often do is I don't really have them as separated as it is here. I just have it for clarity reasons. But what I like to do is I mix up structure and gesture because it gives me a good feeling of how the form actually moves in space. Because we're missing on one dimension if we're just going for gesture without the structure. So the next one is anatomy. And again, it's a deeper understanding of what we're designing. In this case, I wanted to apply the skin, so to say, of a pine tree. So I'm adding very distinct shapes that are recognizable as pine tree. And the twigs, they behave the way they are. They behave in a certain way. And yeah, and then I apply light and shadow to that. So like with live drawing, I'm blocking out the shadow shapes, and then I'm filling it out, and it gives me the basic value structure to work with. So just as a small recap, gesture can be found in anything. We can find it in objects. We can find it in paintings. We can find it in anything, basically. And we apply structure to that to create the illusion of three-dimensionality. And then we apply anatomy to it. And anatomy, in the sense, is a deeper understanding of what we're designing. It can be Greek architecture. It can be just how a mountain, what kind of components we find in a mountain. But it also can be just human anatomy. So, all right, I'll just drink 1 second. So the next principle is hierarchy. And here, it's also one principle that I use very often because it's an overarching principle that helps you to bring your artwork together. And the basic idea of hierarchy is to have one that is overpowering the others. In this case, it's size. We have we're creating contrast, we're creating tension here. And we can apply this principle to anything else. It can be applied to value. So we can have one major artwork being 90% dark and then 10% bright. And this pulls us in, right? We can see that the 10% bright is really catching our attention. If this was 50-50, then it would be less interesting and we didn't know where to look. And we can apply this to color, right? Like saturation, we can have most of the image being desaturated, and then we add saturation to one spot, and then we can guide the eye. And this principle can be applied to anything. It can be applied to forms. If we had an artwork that is consistent out of angular shapes, and we have one round shape, then this would pull our attention, and it's a great way to create interesting artworks. All right. So the next and last principle is about iconic shapes, and I've gathered 3 examples here of really great design. And what makes this really good is that these designs they communicate a lot through their silhouette. And what that tells me is that if we pay attention to the silhouette, then the design in general will be readable. And we can find iconic shapes and silhouettes everywhere. They don't have to be necessarily designed by an artist. These are just trees in nature, right? And we can still recognize them as for what they are. So, for me, it was a realization that, okay, we can find iconic shapes everywhere. We just have to train to see them and to apply them to our artwork. And I'm not only talking about outline of an object, I'm also talking about shadow shapes, for example. Shadow shapes can be very iconic. If we look at shapes in a face, they're always they're patterns that we see again and again. And if we can pick them up, then this will make our artwork much better to read. And we can find these shapes everywhere. Rippling water, for example, has a very specific shape. And yeah. So a few more examples. Here's a painting by Ivan Shishkin. And I think this image is pretty good because it's not only super nicely rendered, but the composition in general is pretty simple, right? We have a plane, it's very straight, and then we have the silhouette standing out. And it just tells me that we don't need that much in a painting as long as we have some really nicely designed silhouettes. That will make our image really readable and striking. And another artwork by good old Jamie Jones. What I really like about his work is it feels effortless, but if I realized that he's putting a lot of work into his silhouettes, and because his silhouettes are so readable, he can be relatively brushy and expressive with the rest because the silhouettes are already communicating the whole idea of this painting. And also another artist to look at is Walter Everett. He's really good with shape design. Some really nice work with that. So as a little recap, we have 3 principles. The first one being gesture, structure, anatomy. Gesture in a sense of we're trying to capture the essence of a pose or a story with a few lines. Structure being we're trying to create an illusion of 3-dimensionality, and anatomy being the deeper understanding of what we're designing. And hierarchy, one is more powerful than the other. Everything else will be grabbing less attention. And then shapes and silhouettes, we're trying to create distinct silhouettes so that we communicate our story. All right, so let's jump into the process. This is my dirty sketching phase. I usually don't show this type of sketches, but it's communicating what I want to design or what I want to draw. In this case, I had this idea of just a person or my main character entering the entrance to the underworld. The idea was to have Orpheus going into the underworld to rescue his wife. And so I wanted to design this area, where he's entering that spot. And here I'm trying to sketch out the whole environment, and I'm already going for a gesture in a sense this is like a vertical gesture going down, and then I'm adding structure to it, working with perspective to know how things are in space. I'm not really concerned about design here. It's just about how I frame everything. And then with the scene as simple as this, I go with just 2 values. I'm trying to figure out the basic statement of this in 2 values. And I'm just having fun with the shapes and trying to create something that is readable with 2 values. And I'm already thinking about the hierarchy here because I want to have this be relatively plain compared to having here all my detail. So the hierarchy in this would be I have detail here and everything else will be less detailed. That's the basic idea. And then I have some references. So I did some research. I wrote down the storyline basically here and some mood paintings that I really liked, and yeah, some more specific references about the architecture, and some props that I wanted to put into the scene, and some plants and all of that, and yeah. So and then with that, I went into color. I'm just adding like as long as you stay true to your two-value structure, the whole image will be readable. And that's why I'm always starting with two values. I have them on separate layers. I have my black value on one layer, and I have the rest on another layer. And then I can just block in colors and have fun with the colors without thinking too much about the value structure anymore. And yeah, so again, here I'm thinking about the hierarchy in terms of color. I want this to be my most saturated like focal point, and then everything else being desaturated. You can see like I'm already indicating some desaturation here, and it's going to be cooler to the edges. And with the values, it's the same. I can use the same principle on values. So I'll try to push for most contrast and highest value in the middle, and then it's going to fade out to the corners. Yeah, and then you can add a third value. For me, it always helps because if the image is readable in two values, it's like unlocking a third value, and then I can work even more structure into my painting. It just gives me a better idea of how this could look like later. So with that, I set up the whole scene in 3D, and there's a nice add-on called Perspective Plotter. You can buy it for like $15 or something. But what you can do is you can set up your whole 3D scene to match the perspective of your 2D image. So you can just pull it in, and then you match like the perspective lines to the ones in your image. And because I started off with perspective, I'm able to do this now in 3D. And sometimes, like with client work, they want like a nice marketing image, but they don't know like what the design is of the buildings they have. So you kind of have to start with the marketing image. You give them like colored roughs and all of that, and then you have to figure out the design like midway, and that will be like crazy to do, like to paint everything. So for me, it always helps to separate this. I go into 3D, and then I can build the whole scene in 3D. It's like a very basic a 3D scene, nothing too crazy about it. I just stole some assets from Quixel and just put everything together here until I have something that is that I can work further with. So with that, I'm adding some more shading, adding some basic shading here to match the color scheme I have in my painting, and I try to match the sun direction as well. So when I render this, I can pull it into my painting and just use the shadow shapes. So it's basically, I have my base already painted, and I can fuse my 3D shadow shapes with the shadow shapes that I've painted before. This way I can still keep it a bit painterly and have the base that I've painted before and can still work with that further. And from here, it's basically rendering. I'm trying to introduce more form. I'm pushing the color variation. I'm working on the vegetation. I'm pushing like the hierarchy. So it's much more saturated here. And I've already blocked in some of my brightest values just as a note that this is going to be the spot of interest. And yeah. And this is the last step. So I added the character. I have some more props here that I built in 3D and pulled into the image. And then, this is all like a bit darker. And, the idea was to have like this flow. You're going back and you're coming in. It's like there's a lot to look at. And yeah, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. That was wonderful.
That was pretty quick, right? I just realized.
Yeah. So we have a lot of time for questions. It was like, it was planning. Oh my gosh, I love your art. Okay, so now we have time for questions. So just raise a hand. And yeah, there we go.
Hi, yeah, I really loved how you like went before in 2D and then in 3D, and I was curious, like once you use the shadows you created in 3D, can you go a bit more in depth? Like, is it a threshold that you're using? On
Yeah,
your, it's
yeah. So
threshold, yeah.
I'm using in Photoshop. You have this option blend if, so you can just pull in images and say like everything that is brighter than this value is going to be transparent. So I'm doing exactly that with the 3D rendering. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So I have a question. What you would recommend for beginners, how to learn the process of working with values? Like what assignments or what exercises would you recommend?
Well, the best assignment is, I think, to try to figure out how you can break down any image into 3 values. Because I think at the beginning, when I was starting out, I was a bit confused because everyone was saying, yeah, you have to get your values right. And for me, it was like, okay, things in the foreground have more contrast and things in the background have less contrast. And that was my basic knowledge. But if you break it down more, you can understand that you can actually break everything down into 3 values. And if your image is readable in 3 values, then it's readable. It's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So I would say, like, if you practice values, then I would practice to simplify down values.
Mm-hmm. And what type of artists you would recommend to like look for, which you like for you it's like a major inspiration in terms of like simplicity and value structure?
Kind of artist. Well, I mean, I probably think like Jamie Jones is pretty good to look at, because I did a few studies of his work, and you can always break it down to 3 values. I'm saying it a lot here, but it's really, that's the key. And I think like if you want to study shapes, for example, like taking a look at Walter Everett is really nice. And yeah, what more? The Fred Taylor is also pretty good, like very graphic artist. I don't know, he's from, I think, the 19th century, but his work is super modern. So yeah, definitely also nice to look at.
Okay, more questions. Here we go.
Hi. So, was your image like exposed to the shadows or the lights, and also like, at what stage do you decide this, and like, how do you think like, oh, for this image it would be more convenient to expose for the lights or for the shadows? Like, how do you do this?
Yeah, I think it depends on where the information is that you have. So if you have information in the light, then I would expose it for the light and then try to compress as much as I can in the shadows so I have a lot of values for my light, right? I guess that. And it also depends on how much percentage of your image is going to be dark. You can decide like, okay, do I want like a low-key image, for example? Then that would mean you had to expose for the shadows, you know, then it depends, yeah. What was the question again?
Yeah, only that, and also asking like the image you did in the tutorial, was that exposed for the shadows? Or?
No, it was exposed for the light.
Ah, yeah. Okay,
so
okay.
the shadows were super compressed. There was like no detail in the shadow, and then I would try to use the most values in the light. Yeah.
And other hands. Okay. Another question from you.
Yeah, I kind of had this debate with a friend like 2 days ago, and it's like to achieve paintings, would you say it's more important to do studies, like random studies, or to try to do a painting and fail? Because that was a big thing. Like, you never know, should I just try the whole process and then maybe it's overwhelming, or should I just study something but maybe I'm not learning how to do the actual thing,
I think it depends on what you want to learn. if you want to study like how to finish a painting, I would try to go the full way, you know, until you have like a painting that feels rendered. Because if you always stop before you're at that stage, you never know like how to finish, right? And short studies really help like if you do like 3-value studies, for example, it really helps to set up a whole image. But then like how do you work further with that? You know, you have to experiment, like how do you take this 3-value study to a finish? Then maybe how do you add color to that, for example? And then, you know, how do you render it till the end? And I think like it always, like depending on what you want to learn, your studies have to be like that. You can do quick sketches, but then you only learn how to set up images, but never learn how to actually finish them.
Thank you, makes sense.
Also, we have Slido. If you would like to ask a few questions, just scan QR code and type questions there. There are any hands? If not, I have a question. Okay. Okay, try to imagine I'm building a portfolio. What would be like a most important thing to showcase if I would strive to do like a more stylized environments, semi-realistic, semi-stylized? If there would be like, okay, what is from you most important thing, like showing that I know the fundamentals or showing that I know how to tell a story? If you know answer for that.
I think what always is super nice to see is that people can generate quick ideas, and that you actually show the whole process of how you come up with your ideas and how you come up with like your images in general. Because sometimes you have people with really good portfolios, but then they join a team, and then you just realize that they're not really quick. They need forever to get something that looks good or that kind of fits the briefing. And so I think what really makes a portfolio good is to have a lot of sketches to like showcase like how fast you can actually generate ideas, and then maybe some finished work.
Perfect. And there we have like the most common question: what brush do you use?
The $50 brush. Oh man, yeah. I mean, I have a Gumroad where my brushes are, and there's this infamous $50 brush that I'm selling for $50, and and the Paint 2 brush. Yeah, check it out.
Thank you. So guys, you know where to go for brushes. And the other question is, tell us your 3 most favorite books.
My 3 most favorite books. I think one of my favorite books is actually Heroes from Stephen Fry. I just read it recently. That's really nicely written. What else? I think maybe Harry Potter.
Ooh.
Yeah. I don't know. I think those 2, yeah.
Okay. That's fair enough. Okay, where do you get your assets from 3D library?
So you can get them from, what's it again? Well, Quixel, of course, you know, like you can get them, like the mega scans, you can use them and just modify them and so they can fit your needs. But you can also get them from like 3D marketplaces. There is some like free downloadable stuff that you can use, and as long as you tweak them and, you know, maybe let them fit your purpose, then, you know, you can just use them. And also for like quick mockups, also super nice to not model everything. You can just do that. Or one good trick you can do is also just, you know, you paint something like a background, and then you put that into your 3D scene, and already creates the illusion of something more detailed in the back. So you don't always have to build everything in 3D. I guess it's a lot about smoke and mirrors, you know.
Yeah. And really quick question: what is the name of the add-on which you use for the perspective?
Add-on is perspective plotter.
Okay, perspective plotter. Would you recommend to get good at studying shapes? Do you idealize your shapes or take them straight from the reference or real world?
I think you can learn a lot when you just try to be very accurate with your shapes. You know, it's sometimes very hard to make shapes in nature look better in your artwork because they're already really well designed. But what helps me when I want to push something, I guess it's like what kind of feeling I have when I see, for example, a pine tree. Then I would push for that gesture, and then I can work on that shape. You know, I will push for a certain feeling that I have with with the tree.
Thank you. And we have last two questions. Why make the scene in 3D when it's already looked as good as 2D? Would you turn it to 3D if you were making it portfolio only as well?
So why do I use 3D in that scene, even though like the 2D looks good? Was that the question?
Something like that.
Yeah. So the reason why I use 3D is, first of all, it's more correct because the perspective is, it's calculated by a program. And secondly, it can be very useful because if you do client work, for example, that was my example. And you have to do a marketing piece, and they don't have like the design of the environment yet, and you still have to go with the painting with this image. Then it's super nice to have actually a 3D model that you can generate ideas from. It's so much quicker. You can build more detailed designs, and it's easier to adjust than have to paint everything and think about values, the shadows, the local values, and perspective all at the same time. So it's really nice to have that separated and just work on the design. Yeah, that's why I pulled it into 3D.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, and the last, tricky one. What is the most painful in your daily process? What do you hate doing?
I think the most painful is really finding the idea in general, finding the composition. If I have something down and it's readable in two values, I think that's the most important part. And then rendering that, adding color is pretty easy. But finding the right composition, finding the perspective, or what kind of shapes you want to use, that is always that's the most painful part. I mean, painful. It can be fun.
Yeah, sometimes it is, sometimes no. Okay, thank you guys for coming, and thank you, Kevin, for coming. Has been a pleasure.